Your dream watch is within reach, if you act fast. Savvy collectors have turned to Jones & Horne Horological Auctions for over 40 years for great brands without the markups or hidden fees. They normally run 2 auctions per month, but their month-long spring featured auction is live right now. It ends tomorrow, May 28th, and features incredible brands like AP, Rolex, Universal Genève, and more. There's something for every collector and every budget. Unlike other auction houses, Jones & Horne never has reserves or adds a buyer's premium to the purchase price. Winners pay what they bid for, plus shipping, saving you 20% or more in extra fees. Plus, you can bid with confidence since every single lot includes a detailed condition report. If you're ready to upgrade your collection, they can even help you consign or sell your collection outright, avoiding marketplace scammers or forum tire kickers. Don't wait, bidding ends tomorrow during the live auction close. Buy where the dealers buy. Head to jones-horne.com to register and bid in their May 28th featured live auction.
Hello and welcome to the Worn and Wound podcast. My name is Zach Kazan. I'm the editorial director at Worn and Wound. Thank you for joining us for another podcast today. We have a really fun episode planned. I'm joined by the one and only Ben Cook of Ben's Watches. Maybe you've heard of him. Instagram, TikTok, he's all over social media. Ben, welcome to the Worn and Wound podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I love going on podcasts, and I'm excited to actually go on the Worn and Wound podcast. This is a cool full circle moment for me.
Yeah, no, I was trying to think, like, have we had you on the podcast yet? And we haven't. We did an interview like years ago. It feels like now, and literally it was years ago, and for a feature story that we wrote about you on the website, which we'll link to, obviously. But yeah, I can't believe this is the first time we've had you on the podcast. I feel like it's something we've talked about in the past, and I feel like we have like a nice in for this, like an angle for this podcast, so we can kind of use as a jumping off point for like a wider discussion. But like, I'm really glad to finally have you on. It's great to welcome you to the pod.
Yeah, thank you. It's cool. Like we get to see each other all the time, obviously. All the wind-ups and at events, and it's cool to finally. I think the discussion site, people are really gonna like it because it's a little bit of a different sort of discussion I think people are used to, which is cool.
Yeah, I think so. So we'll get into sort of our main topic. Well, I'm sure we'll touch on a bunch of different things in this conversation. But before we do that, as we always do on the Worn and Wound podcast, we'll do a wrist check. What are you wearing today, Ben?
I'm wearing my Rolex GMT Master 16.
Beautiful. Very nice.
I don't know if I've seen you since I've had this on. I'm not entirely sure, but this one's
I've seen you, but I haven't seen you with the watch. So tell us the story behind this watch, because I know you have a good kind of story behind it.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I met the guys at Win Vintage, Eric Wynn and Charlie Dunn, and Eric's. I mean, you could disagree with me, but I think he's like the #1 vintage Rolex guy in the world, and he's become a very good friend and almost a little bit of a mentor to me. And they showed me a 1675, and that was the first time I fell in love with a vintage watch. And I've wanted one ever since. And over the last couple months, I've been ready to purchase one by trading watches because these things are expensive. So I sort of got it, and I'm just obsessed with it. It's a gilt dial, which basically means there's lots of gold lettering. The bezel's cool. It's like a orange almost on the bottom now, and then the top is stayed to this blue. It's basically unpolished. It has a stretch bracelet, if you can see.
Those are so cool.
And just all these cool hallmarks. And it doesn't look like it's from the 60s. And I just love the story and stuff behind vintage. I think it's kind of where my collecting journey is going to go over the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's interesting. So so it looks great, and you've posted a handful of photos of it on social media, and it always looks great when you post it. It's a beautiful watch. That's obviously a classic reference. It's interesting that you're like moving into vintage at this time. I started years ago when I started collecting. Like I was buying a lot of vintage because it was a time period when vintage was like still kind of not like easy to get into. It was just a different time, and there were like more kind of like, what we would think of as like correct vintage watches, sort of like readily available watches that hadn't been like, redialed or over polished or anything. those have like really dried up. And that's where I think people like Eric Wind and, other really great vintage dealers like come into play, because like they can like, they can source like the really good stuff and be, honest with you about like you know, what you should stay away from, I think, at certain times. So like, yeah, it's interesting that you're getting into vintage now. Do you have like other vintage watches sort of like on your list that you want to get into, like other Rolexes or other
I
pieces?
love vintage Tudor subs. In transparency, I did trade my Tudor sub in order to get this watch.
Yeah. That's a good
Didn't make
trade, I
sense for
think.
me, but I love that, and I think one of the things I think draws me to vintage watches specifically is, and this is sort of a interesting place. We see modern watches every day, all day, 24/7,
Yeah.
and it's really cool to come across older models, and that I also don't know. There's not a lot of information available online, so when I'm buying something like this, like I can barely tell the difference between lightly polished and polished, and a
Hmm.
redial versus like it's a lot of trust, which is hard. But
Hmm.
I find that it's almost like a little bit of a game, and I like the way they wear. Yeah, it is interesting, but I'm so happy with it,
Yeah.
and I think I'll continue.
Yeah, no, it's very, very cool. I'm wearing so I've had this watch for years. It's a Seiko X Worn and Wound, Seiko 5 Sports,
Oh,
X Worn
sick.
and Wound collaboration that we did several years ago with Seiko, and it's like it's still one of my favorite Worn and Wound wind up limited editions that we've done, and we had like a really fun party for it when it was released. I have so many like memories attached to this watch. I haven't worn it in quite a long time. I've been going through like a reorganizing process with like my various watches and watch ephemera, because they're just starting to like take up a lot of space. And I sort of like pulled
Oh
this
yeah.
one out of a closet and was like, oh yeah, like this watch is great. I'm gonna wear this
Mhm.
today. So I've been enjoying it. Yeah, just like still one of my favorite like Seiko fives, period, since they relaunched the Seiko
Agreed.
5 Sports line several years ago now. But so yeah, that's what I've got on today. Also, just like it wears really well. It's good like summer watch, very comfortable. So
Perfect. Yeah.
cool. So Ben, the reason I like initially asked you on the podcast is because after Watches and Wonders, which of course we've discussed on this podcast ad nauseum over the last like a month or so, coming out of that event, you posted I thought a pretty compelling um Instagram reel or TikTok. Maybe it was on both. I don't know. I don't even know where
Both.
I'm
Yeah.
seeing you all the time. Like, cause I open my social media and then it's just Ben everywhere. But,
Mm.
you, you posted, this reel that asked the question, is the watch community toxic? And it's sort of like got into this idea of like the hierarchies within the watch communities and the idea of like influencers versus traditional media. And I thought we could kind of like unpack that, because I think it's like a really interesting topic. And I think it's something that we all sort of like talk about, like sort of like amongst ourselves and like in different ways. And I thought it was like really interesting that you're just kind of like putting it out there. So I wanted to kind of like just get your, like overall thoughts, if you maybe for folks who haven't like seen that piece of content, if you could sort of just like summarize like what your thesis is and just kind of like, maybe we can just talk about like where we are, in relation to, like coming out of Watches and Wonders, like why you felt compelled to post that and make that piece of content.
Yeah. So that was my second time at Watches and Wonders, and sort of, and I said this to other people. I didn't put it in my video, but this is a great way of explaining it. It a lot of the time, especially when I'm in Geneva, and I love the city, and I love 99% of the people. It just feels almost a lot like high school. Does that make sense?
Mm,
It's very clicky. It's very, what event are you going to? Are you invited to this one? And it's a lot of, it just, I don't like that. It feels very
yeah.
exclusionary. And there are certain parts of, the watch industry where you kind of have to be exclusionary. Like if a high-end brand's hosting a dinner, for example, you want high-end collectors there, right? So
Yeah.
you have to pick and choose. There's certain points where like I understand, but like if I want to walk into a booth and try to get a meeting potentially, and yeah, I'm not gonna reveal who, like basically like, oh sorry, like you can't come in, shade. And I'm not saying that because of me, but I know if it's happening to me, it's happening to so many people. And oh, you're not invited to this event, or oh, we didn't send you. I had brands being like, yeah, we didn't send you a meeting. Like It's just it. I don't like it. I felt like this for a while, and as I've grown and gotten bigger, I would say it's happening to me specifically less and less, but I still notice it. And it just feels like there's this weird sector of the watch industry that's almost like untouchable, very
Hmm.
clicky, very I don't know how much value that's being provided. I'm not gonna get too into it, but
Yeah.
it just feels wrong to me when I know what the real collectors and the people who are buying watches are, and they're not like that at all.
Yeah.
Just feels wrong.
I think, yes, like you're touching on something that I think a lot of folks like in my position who are involved with sort of like online watch media
Mhm.
felt when like blogs like ours and blogs like Hodinky and others were sort of like rising up. And I feel like it's a similar dynamic to like online media versus print media, like back in the day. And now I feel like it's something that's repeating itself with, folks like you who are kind of like based in like the social media, you know,
Mhm.
space. And it's tough to sort of like break break in, even when people like you and other creators are having like incredible success, and it feels like that's where the space is really heading. It's heading like away from like the web and more
I think,
towards. Yeah, go
to be
ahead.
honest, like my argument with people is like I think a couple years ago it was heading there. I think it's here. Um, I made this analogy when I first started. Like, if you look at like the car community,
Hmm.
like 99% of car stuff is on YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok. Like that's where people are viewing their car content. If you look at fragrances, you look at fashion, these are all true. Online media is always going to be a thing. Print media, despite what some people might think, is always going to be a
Yep.
thing. But there's room for this new thing. And I think video specifically is here now.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons I made that video is it still feels like it's not here. And it feels like it's kind of being shunned out a little bit. And there's even hierarchies within not just, influencers versus traditional media, it's within influencers
Yeah,
and
yeah.
people try to position themselves. It's like, it's just crazy. And again, I keep in like using the high school analogy. Maybe it's because I didn't have a great time in high school, but that's how I'm used. That's how it feels. Like it's
Yeah.
very like very competitive to one another instead of like if I do well, influencer X, Y, and Z also do well, which is how I view it.
Yeah.
It feels like it's I want that, they're not allowed to come, and it's just this like I don't like it.
Yeah, no, it's
I
like
don't think
it's
it's
not
good for
a.
anybody.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that like it's there ought to be like a more sort of like egalitarian approach. You brought up the I word, which is influencer, which is something that like as someone, I'm older than you, quite a
Right.
bit older than you. I'm in my 40s, which feels like ancient in the in the world of like watch media right now. I'm wondering, like, can you like help us define like what an influencer actually is? 2026. Do you consider yourself an influencer, as of right now? Like, and what does that like practically mean in the world
Yeah,
of
so like
watches?
for a while I won't lie, I hated the term. And I think the term influencer buckets you. It could be a lot. You could have 5,000 followers and just post selfies all the time, to you could be a multi-million-dollar business owner, and that could all be an influencer, and there's certain levels of that. And so I didn't like that because I think when people there's also a negative connotation with that term. I think what an influencer is to me is it's a one person or one personality media company.
Hmm.
That's how I view it. Like what I am doing is no doubt in my mind a media company. That's how I treat it. I mean, I know I'm very off the cuff, and sometimes I'll take 3 hours to make a video. Sometimes I take 30 seconds. But it's it's attention, and there's also within influencers there's a degree of what you're doing. There's like tastemakers where the whole thing is about their aesthetic and what they're talking about and posting about. There's opinion people, which is kind of like how I feel like the bucket I'll fall in, which gets me in trouble sometimes, but that's beside the point. And then yeah, there's all different kinds. There's people that are basically an extension of the brands, and
Right.
they're essentially just like are a part of the watch brand. There's people who are kind of a part of the watch brands and not. I guess that's maybe my bucket. And then there's people who they're just so it's hard for me to say like
Yeah.
had to define influencer, but I think anybody that's posting, it's really just a media company, but nobody's ever gonna fall for that.
I think the thing that like I always got tripped up on with the whole idea of like influencing is it like to me it like always connoted that like that there was something being sold, and like that maybe it wasn't always transparent that there was something being sold
Right.
through content. But it feels like the definition of what an influencer is kind of like expanding a little bit. I like the idea of like kind of considering it like a one person media company. And of course, like if you're a one person media company, just like any other media company, there's going to have to be like a selling aspect to
Absolutely.
that is like, like at Warner Brown, I feel like we do a pretty good job of like dividing like, the editorial side from the commercial side. Everything is always like very clearly, labeled
Defined,
what's,
yeah.
what's editorial and what's, how do you approach that? Because obviously like, you're making a living doing this. So
Right.
it's, like what are your thoughts on how to kind of like, divide that like that personal opinion space, which as you point out, sometimes you get in trouble for, versus like
Right.
working with brands to like to make money so you can continue to like do what you're doing and have a perspective that you can share.
Yeah, one thing I think I'll say for people listening and even people who just clicked on this or whatever is what I do work with the watch brands. Like there's
Hmm.
no ifs, ands, or buts about that. I do that. I think where I differ from a lot of people is just because I'm being offered money or offered something, there's a number of brands that have that I say no. It's
Yeah.
because the number one thing for me is, yes, I do work with the watch brands, and that's how I make money for now. I've done some collabs. I've sold product. I've flipped watches. I've done kind of everything. I do work for my audience at the end of the day. I'm trying to provide the most unbiased thoughts around any watch release. So, like, for example, people are always like, I use this brand as like, people like you work with Norking. I'm super tight with the Norking guys, but I actually consistently wear mine. I was actually wearing mine this morning because I went to the golf simulator and I played with it, and now I'm wearing this. Like, it's an active part of my life. And when you see a video of me wearing it, it's not because oh, it's like I just want to be very clear about that. I also understand that from a viewer, that's also hard to believe slash understand, but it's a tough balance because, for example, we'll talk about this later, but like at the recording of this podcast, I posted a video about a new Omega watch that I just thought, I just don't know where the head was at with making it.
Yeah.
I'm probably never going to be invited to a Omega event. I haven't. I probably never will. But it's some brands are okay with it. Some brands are not okay with it. It really depends on who you're talking to. And at the end of the day, like I have plans I don't want to be working with watch brands anymore, straight up in 5 years.
Hmm.
Potentially, well, not potentially, I am planning on making my own watch brand, which is very
Hmm.
cool, which I think I've spoken to you about
Yeah.
before. To kind of get away from that because I want to be completely independent. I do work with some brands, but it's a hard balance.
Yeah. I think that like the thing that I like to believe, and I don't know how true it is. I know it's true for some brands, like absolutely. And I think other brands like struggle with this idea is that like it benefits them to work with creators and media companies, people like us who will like be absolutely honest about
Mhm.
their products. And, of course, there's also value in like in paying for content that is, that's positive, like, commercial content, like
Of
that's
course.
valuable. But like, there's a certain amount of cachet or integrity that like can't really be bought. Like when a brand works with us or works with you or with Hodinkee and like the review comes out and it's like either negative or like very balanced and like the take is honest, like
Mhm.
it reflects, like it reflects on the watch, obviously. Like people will like have an opinion on the watch based on what they read, but it also like, kind of subtly underscores that like this brand isn't afraid to like work with someone that might, call them out or, or be critical. And like, to your point about Omega, like we've been very critical of Omega, in the past. I've written, I don't even know how many negative, articles about moon swatches over the years. I'll watch it. Like, I just like,
Yeah.
have come to kind of like can't stand really. And like,
Hmm.
they still work with us. Like, Zach Weiss went to an Omega, thing in Switzerland right before Watches and Wonders. Like, we still get invited, and we got, the same access to that watch you mentioned, alluded to, that we'll talk about later,
Yeah.
as everyone else. So like, I do think that like, I don't know if that's like a changing tide, or if it's, kind of like maybe always been like that with certain brands to some extent. But I do like to think, maybe this is like the optimist in me, that like brands understand that, it's important to let people have their honest, authentic reactions to watches. It's like, it's really essential. Like, if like watch media is going to have any
No, I
relevance at
agree.
all.
And I think the hard, like, from somebody that just a few years ago, like I was the consumer of all the media, it didn't feel like I was ever watching, for the most part, like a negative review. I would say like
Yeah.
you guys will be negative when you want to be negative, which I can appreciate because I see it. But I think majority of what's out there is just overly positive because people want access
Yeah.
and because they don't want to get rid of that. And I'm positive about a lot of stuff too, but I also be you gotta have both sides of the coin. But I also think, to your point, that's sort of the reason why I think my page, and I say one person media company, I meant like one personality because I do have people that work for me now, which is very cool. But I think that's why we've been able to grow, is because I'm like, I want to call it like it is. I don't
Hmm.
like, I'm not gonna say it's the worst watch in the world. I will call you out if it's like a pattern of ridiculous behavior.
Yeah.
Um, and that stuff should be said. And it's all being said. And the thing is, it's all being said in comment sections, but it's
Yes.
never actually put out to the world. And I think like it's everybody knows, like every watch person, watch media person, when a watch comes out, they know the public's reaction is going to be in 3 seconds. Like
Oh,
you
you
can
think
see it, you
so?
be like,
I'm often surprised. Maybe like I'm in a bubble here because I'm like
maybe
I'm
yeah.
in New Hampshire, and I'm not like, I'm not seeing I'm not like hanging out with you guys quite as much, but like I'm sometimes like really surprised by the public reaction to certain things. Yeah, it's hard. I'll try to think of an example of that, but we can come back to that. But
It's
yeah,
all
like
like taste.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I just have like, I don't know. Sometimes like sometimes I feel like I'm not as up on like some of the trends as
I think that's
as
what it is. Yeah.
and like I think sometimes the public moves past the trends quicker than like media does,
Mhm.
and like like I still like a stone dial. Like I still see like like the stone dial thing is like not over. I still get stone dial press releases in my inbox like almost every week, it seems
Yeah.
like. And I think the public has like moved on like from that
Mhm.
to a large extent. I still like it. I don't know. But like that's the thing, is like you have to approach these things authentically and just sort of like let the chips fall where they may. Like to your point though about, like seeing all these positive reviews. I kind of have this theory that people don't actually want to see negative reviews. Like you kind of can't win when it
Mhm.
comes to, whether you're positive or negative in a review. If you're negative, you start getting comments about like, well, why does he have an axe to grind, against this brand, or questions about like, did they understand, what the brand was trying to do, or did they understand the watch, or, and like obviously the pitfalls of like being positive, or, you think the public might think, well, are they in cahoots? Is there a financial relationship that's not being disclosed? I find that like,
Right.
as an enthusiast who approaches this stuff for, like I want to like things, like I don't,
Yeah.
like I want to find like the silver lining, so to speak, in every watch. And like we were flexible enough as a company at this point to like pick and choose what we want to review and talk about. And so we're
Mhm.
naturally more inclined to talk about the things that we like. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's kind of like you can't really win necessarily with either like a positive or a negative review. So you just have to be authentic. You just have to kind of like call it as you see it.
Yeah, it's also, I think from my perspective too, it's hard because I think a lot of, if I do see something I really, really, really like, the instant video, and then I think there's a lot that's just doesn't even like, I don't even have an opinion over. Like I see it or I read about it and I'm like, okay, don't even, it's not even worth a positive or negative review.
Yeah,
Like it's
yeah.
either, and that's also like the social media algorithm. And I guess maybe a problem is if something's really, really good and I think it's going to perform well and I really like it, I'm going to post about it. But if I really, really, really don't like it and I think it's terrible, I'm going to post about it because odds are somebody else feels the same way and odds are it's going to get more views.
Hmm.
So it's just like back and forth scenario where like if something's just okay, like it's not getting on my page, it has to be
Yeah.
really bad or really good.
And that's the thing. I think like most watches are kind of falling into that, like it's just okay
Mhm.
category. I don't know, how I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, but I feel like most of the stuff that I get sent, most of the press releases that come through in my inbox are like, I don't have like a super strong feeling about them one way or the other. And I think that's maybe a function of just like seeing so many watches and like it's harder for a watch to really impress me, at this point. And like it's also harder for a watch to be really disappointing too. Most watches exist in this like kind of like wide middle, like middle area for me, I think at
Right.
this point.
Yeah. No, you are definitely right. I remember I was meeting with a guy. I did this collab with Ren. I
Hmm.
think you probably remember that. And
Sure.
I showed it to somebody within the watch industry, and they're like, "Oh, this is cool." And in my head, it was the coolest thing I've ever seen. But he's been in the watch industry for 15 years, so
Hmm.
he's seen everything you can possibly see. So I was like, "Okay, well, like he had like a kind of just like a neutral reaction to it." I'm like, "Okay, I kind of understand that because you've seen watches every single day for your basically your entire adult life. At a certain point, you've seen everything." I think the other most popular comment from people, and I'm assuming you have the same feeling about this as well, is stuff is just getting really, really, really expensive.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, this is not necessarily just true of watches. This is true of pretty much everything in our life
Hmm.
now, but watches in particular, micro brands that start at $500 are now on a $3,000 watch they're making, which from a business perspective, I know I get why they're doing that.
Hmm.
Sell one watch, you make more money,
Hmm.
$1,000 watch. But it's these higher end brands like, and I love JLC. It's getting expensive. I can't even think about buying. There's a lot of brands that I wish it doesn't make sense when you compare it to the alternative of using that money to something else, like buying a car. Like it just doesn't in my head. I just can't. And we are irrational watch enthusiasts where $500 is cheap for something like really cheap.
Hmm.
Stuff is just a lot of these brands are getting Omega as one of them. They're getting really expensive. And it's
Yeah,
like,
I mean, a
I don't know
Speedmaster's
who's buying them.
$10,000, which is
Oh,
just,
yeah.
it's like it wasn't that long ago where that was like a pretty approachable, you know, li- for a luxury purchase, it was like pretty approachable. It was something you could like,
Right.
reasonably sort of like, save
Good
for,
watch.
aspire to,
It- It's
pretty,
like
accessible.
I just heard Cartier had, speaking of, and I won't talk too much more about price because I get heated, not heated, but I'm like, it's crazy. Cartier's had a price increase, worldwide price increase, at least on the Santos. I know for a fact it was yesterday or today, went from like 7,600 to $8,400.
Yeah,
Like 4 years ago, that was a $6,000 watch.
right.
Like
Yeah.
I like that watch, and don't get me wrong, but anybody in the watch industry that's handled that watch, that's not $8,000. Like
Yeah,
I
the
could
thing is like they
it's fine.
haven't and the problem. I mean, the prices going up is a problem. Obviously, like no one wants to pay more for
Right.
watches. Like we all want to, we all want to pay as little as possible for like these like expensive things that we enjoy. But I think that like it would be easier to stomach if like the watches were also like getting better. Like if
Mhm.
if the Santos had like you know, was, 30% improved to go with its 30% increase over the last, like, however
Or
many
perceived
years or
value. They
whatever.
do one
Yeah, yeah.
thing.
Like, but it's the same watch. It's not really
Mhm.
like, they have like, different dial executions or whatever. Some of them might be more complex. They make like little adjustments here and there. But like, I don't see where, and like the Speedmaster is sort of like the good example that like proves and disproves this point. And you just have to ask yourself of like, if like the new movement and the bracelet are worth paying $10,000 for a watch, or close to $10,000 for a watch that like used to be like 6,000, or
Right.
whatever, like all day, every day. So yeah, it's just like it's the proposition of like what is important to you in terms of value and making that equation. But yeah, I think to a large extent the watches have remained the same as the prices have gone up, and that's what's really frustrating.
And it's like it's not just like they've gone like significantly up. Like there's like
Yeah.
tariffs, there's inflation, there's currency
Hmm.
changes. I understand from that point of view, but yeah, you're right. Like the new Speedmaster with the new bracelet is pretty great.
Yeah.
Like the bracelet I think is awesome. Is it 4,000 awesome or however much it was increased or like maybe not, but at least they improved something. It's just like with other stuff, it's just hard. That's why I love what you guys do, and I love going to wind up. And I'm not just saying that. It's because if you don't want to fall in that budget, you can get something pretty comparable for a fifth of the price from a
Hmm.
really cool brand, and you're supporting somebody's dream. And that's the reason why I love that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like that's sort of where that's a big part of like the value equation for me is like I think about like where my money is going and what is it going to do. And I don't love the idea of like sending more money to Richemont or LVMH or the Swatch. Like they don't need
It's
more
true. They don't
money.
need it.
Like
No.
I would much rather, like, and I'm privileged to like have access to, to these watches and to be able to like, make these decisions before I decide to like, put my money towards them. But like, it's
Right.
just so
Right.
much more satisfying to like, to support a small maker, to support a small
Hmm.
brand, an independent brand or a micro brand, knowing that the, like that purchase of that watch is actually going to be like, you know, helpful for them to make the next watch, which I think
Exactly.
that's what we want them to do if we like them enough to like invest in something. So yeah, I think about that a lot.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Getting back to sort of like the hierarchies and that's sort of like I think a natural tension in the in the watch community around watches and wonders specifically as you called out in your in your Instagram reel, TikTok reel. Like, what do you think? Is there like a solution to that? Like that you see? Like, what's the how does this like change or not change, over the course of like does Watches and Wonders look different a year from now? Like, is there a way that it can like or is this just sort of like how is the way brands kind of give access sort of like baked into this?
That's a good question. I don't necessarily have an answer for that. I think I to my point of view, I'm not on the brand side at all. So like I don't want anybody to take this from like a Ben's right about this. I just think it seems like there's a lot of marketing spending from a lot of these brands that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. And I think could go to things that one moves the needle more and two includes more people.
Hmm.
So like instead of like buying a billboard in downtown Chicago for $20,000 a month, it's a lot of money. You don't even need that. You could one decrease the prices, which they'll never do, or just not increase the prices for stuff like that. Or like a magazine ad. I don't necessarily think that's moving the needle.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not trackable. Like, why not like innovate a little bit? Like, I think the brands that are it's so evident right now. The brands are doing so well. You take a look at like Christopher Ward, even Tudor, a lot of these micro brands. Yeah, the price point is they're winning, but they're also agile and they understand the future and they're looking towards like what does this look like years from now in terms of being on social media, not necessarily like partnering with the creator, but like understanding that you have to be there. The head of the brand like has to be like Richard from Studio Underdog is at all the wind up shows.
Yeah.
Like I don't see the head of Hamilton, for example, at a show. Like
Yeah.
it's I had a conversation. This is another tangent, but not tangent, but important. I had a conversation with a big watch brand, like big, like massive part of a conglomerate CEO. And I asked what he thought about the micro brands because they sell a lot of watches now. It's no joke anymore. Like every time I see them posting the numbers, I am blown away at how
Hmm.
much they're selling. And he said, "What's a micro brand?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, they don't have any heritage. They're not going to be around in a couple of years." And after I told them the numbers and they just don't get it and they don't understand that this is the now and they don't want to see that future. They want to just continue to do what they do. So to answer your question, what needs to change? I think a lot. I think
Yeah.
the marketing budget needs to go to somewhere else. I think I've Watches and Wonders to me, yes, it's a retailer event. I think it's way more of a media event. And you could see that by the amount of collectors that have come in over the last increase from last year to 2 years before. the amount of collectors, and they're not coming because of the retailers. Maybe some of them. A lot of them are coming because they're seeing it on the social media,
Hmm.
and that's the whole driving force of it. And then also, um, one other thing is I'm not necessarily sure how much a lot of these retailers will be around. It seems like all of these brands, even though I love a retailer because you can go see seven brands, a lot of these brands are just going to boutiques.
Yeah.
They're taking their stuff out. And yeah, so it was a long-winded answer. I don't really know, but those are a couple of things I think will be good.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that you landed on the important thing, which is that there's this like kind of like the institutional nature of the watch industry. Like it's built on like literally hundreds of years of like, tradition, and like the large luxury brands just move so slowly and are so slow to adapt to a world where, influencers or one person media companies or whatever you want to call
Either
them
way,
are
we
like,
also, yeah.
like that's like it's a critical part of their it has to be a critical part of their strategy, and they're just not like they're not recognizing that. And I think that's like a big part of like where the tension is. And like you really see that, like we do, like there's Watches and Wonders, and then on either side of Watches and Wonders, we have our wind up event in Dallas and our wind up event in San Francisco. And like the
Mhm.
contrast between like those events, they're obviously like very different kinds of events, of course. But the approach that the brands take to media, the brands that attend Watches and Wonders, and some of them are like not small brands, like Christopher Ward is like not a small brand, you
They're a
know,
big brand. Yeah.
anymore. Like Studio Underdog, you mentioned, like Studio Underdog, acquired a watch assembly company. Like
Yeah.
they're also like they're not a small brand anymore. So like, but like their approach to media and to access is like so different from the approach that like large historical brands that like have a concern with heritage take. I think that like I don't know if you have any thoughts on like what your TikTok and Instagram audience thinks about heritage. Like my inclination is that like they probably don't really care that much. Like am I wrong about that? Like I don't care that much like about heritage. I've been at this for a while. Like I'm interested in the history, but it's not like a factor in like a purchasing decision ever really for me.
No, I think it's definitely different on each side of I think there's people that do care. I think at one point I cared. Just 5 years ago, I probably did, and I think now, just with the quality going up across the board,
Hmm.
like there really is no reason. And there's also manufactured heritage where you can get
Right.
like you could buy a brand that looks like they're making a Dirty Dozen watch, even though it's not a Dirty Dozen watch brand. Like
Hmm.
you can get that feeling of being part of heritage when you're not buying Furlan Mari, for example, one of my favorite brands. Like that brand's been around for less than 5 years, but
Hmm.
they look like they have tons. Like I think if you're going to go the heritage route, which every brand does, Tudor, Rolex, brands are very successful, you have to back it up with quality. And when it's the heritage is the number one reason your selling point and you're not innovating in any way, it's a recipe for disaster. And I think we're kind of seeing that.
Yeah. I feel like a younger watch consumer, just like my inclination, and like I talk to them at Wind Up and on social media, and I see them at events and everything. Like I feel like they care about like innovation. I think is something that people are interested in, and they want like a cool watch. It
Mhm,
really comes down to like, is this something I think is cool that will make me feel cool when I wear it? Like that is like the lizard brain sort of
mhm.
like equation that we're all trying to solve, when we put a watch on. And like that has nothing to do really with, you know, whether the watch brand was founded in, like the 1700s versus the
Yeah.
1900s versus 10 years ago. And, to your point, like the quality has gone, way up, even like very small micro brands are doing like really creative things with craft and offering interesting watches at like very compelling price points that have like interesting like handmade elements to them. And like you can
Yep.
get something like really cool that like has like sort of like the earmarks of heritage from like newer brands because they're finding like interesting ways to do things, um and taking new approaches.
Yeah, I think your point, I totally agree on the cool factor. I can't stress that enough. Like Cartier has had a rent. Is it because they're great watchmakers? No. Is, is it because they have heritage? A little bit. Is it because they're cool right now? Yes.
Yeah.
That's the reason. That's at the end of the day, like people buy cool. The Vacheron 222, the new one that came out, is that a really good watch? I wouldn't say it's amazing. It's pretty good, but
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. Like, and I think you're so right. Brands that are doing really well right now are doing the cool right.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, like people are, very concerned with movement. They're very concerned. This is what they say. But at the end of the day, the number one thing is design. And if they don't
Hmm.
like the design of the watch and the way it wears, they're not going to care about anything else. They
Yeah.
could
You
have
gotta,
like, the-
you
yeah.
gotta like the way it looks, like I think that's like the
Hmm.
thing that like sometimes we forget. I think I have conversations with people about like specs and size and like really getting into the minutia of of any particular watch, but like there's something kind of like intangible that's hard to like pinpoint of just like that feeling you get when you see it, when you check the time. Do you like the way it looks? Like, does this like give me like that little bit of serotonin when I, when I check the time? And like, I think that's
That's
what it
all of it.
always, yeah, it's like,
We're all addicts at the end of the day.
it always comes down to that. Yeah. I want to ask you just like a couple of things, before I let you go, Ben. Like, there've been a handful of like really kind of like big watch news stories that have like kind of like come up just in the last couple of weeks. I want to get your take, and I want to kind of like hear your perspective as someone who, has an audience that's like mostly on social media,
Mhm.
which is a little different from Worn and Wound's community. Obviously, we have the social media
Right.
audience, but it's like it's different.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about the Royal Pop. We've talked about the Royal Pop on this podcast. This is the third week in a row we've discussed the Royal Pop. So I apologize to listeners who are who are tired of it. Have you had a chance to see one in person yet? And like, I'm curious about your impressions and also like what your reaction to the reaction has been over the last like week or so.
So I've not seen one in person. I was shocked, to be honest, on how mainstream it got. I had people from high school I haven't talked to in 10 years asking me if I could get them one. I'm like, I can't get one for myself. Like, that's when to our discussion just before, the fact it's the cool factor.
Mm-hmm.
AP is cool.
Yeah.
And I think the reaction to the reaction is what I really don't like about this. When they came out and it was a pocket watch, I was so in. I thought that was very creative, and I really liked the way AP was approaching it. Um, and I know you're not a big like moon swatch guy, and I understand that. I think it was a cool way of getting more people into the hobby, which is very important to me. What I didn't like is people who were trying to buy that watch, almost none of them actually wanted it.
Yeah. It's
And it
all
was all
flippers.
people that
And
were
yeah.
trying to flip it. And I went to the Soho, I was at an event in Soho, and I went after, I'm like, let me just walk over. This was after they said it was a pocket watch. And I tried to buy a spot in line because for me, I'm willing to pay more because this is my job. So
Sure.
I'm willing to do that for content. And also,
What was
I
the
just
spot
wanted
in
to see it
line
in
going
person.
for? What was the going rate for a
So they said minimum 3,000,
jeez?
and they could charge up to 5,000. Now I just saw on StockX just before this, they're going for like 1,300. So
Yeah.
not that much. But the more interesting thing is how rude they were to me. You have like they don't know who I am. I'm not saying that I'm anybody, but it's just like I could have been any like Joe Schmo on the street. Like they were like, "You're trying to scam us," and they're all like, "It's like drugs. It's not good."
Yeah.
I left, and then when after the day of launch on Saturday, I was in Soho already with my family or my girlfriend's family. I'm like, let me just walk by the Soho store and see what's going on because I'm seeing all these videos. They had sold the watches apparently, and they were already in line for the next batch.
Mm.
The flippers were already sitting in line for the next batch. I'm like, this is not, in my opinion, this is not, I don't think AP wanted this. I think AP wanted the hype for sure. I think they knew people would flip it for sure, but I didn't think they would know people would be pepper sprayed and
Yeah.
there'd be people overdosing in line, which I saw, like, it's insane. I think it's really turning me off to it.
Yeah.
I
Same.
don't like that because I really think it's cool. And I know this is very like watch elitism of us, but as somebody that actually wants to buy it, like I literally want one for myself
Hmm.
as a collector. I can't get one. And it's under the skies of like, well, we're doing it in person because if we do it online, there's going to be all these bots. That's not why they're doing it. They're doing it in person because they can get this big spectacle.
Right.
And
Swatch wants
yeah.
they want the. I mean, it's been in the media. Like Swiss media, was reported that the chairman of Swatch, Nicholas Hayek, like literally was quoted as saying, "We'll link to the article," that like they wanted this. Like
Yeah.
it's good that like people are like fighting over the product. It's so interesting to me that like, like the difference in approach between Swatch and AP could not be more different. Like Swatch has a history, back to the Moon Swatch and even earlier, with
Oh yeah.
with other kind of like, not as like hyped. The Moon Swatch was a big cultural moment, but like there have been other like important swatches. There've been so many like artist collaborations over the years. There's
Mhm.
always this element of kind of like you gotta. There's like a timed element. Like they're good at like building a sense of buzz for these watches, and they want to see those crowds. AP could not be more different. There's no company, there's no
Yeah.
watch brand, maybe with the exception of like FP Journe, that is so controlling over every single watch. This is like the opposite of what they
Oh my
want.
gosh. I know people that own 10 Royal Oaks and they bought them all from AP. They sold like the second one they bought because they weren't wearing it anymore and they got blacklisted. Like they
Yeah,
are so strict on resellers. I can't imagine AP seeing this and being happy about it. I could
yeah,
definitely imagine Swatch Group being happy about it, or Swatch, sorry, the company. I don't want to say the whole group because who knows.
sure, yeah.
And that's kind of the problem I have. And again, why I'm turned off by it is it's like it's just from yeah, it's not good. It's not good.
Yeah, it's very yeah, it's kind of troubling. I like you, I also want one. Like I would definitely, I said on the podcast last week, like if I'm traveling through the Geneva airport at some point and I and I see one after clearing security, like I'd probably pick one up in that circumstance. I think it'd like kind of
Right.
like look cool on my desk, but yeah, like the whole like the rollout has just been like a real debacle, and like it kind of like it reflects poorly, I think, on both of these brands, and also like
Mhm.
it's not a good look for the community itself, like the way that and it's to your point, it's not the community that's like lining up, like to flip these watches.
No.
Those are not enthusiasts, but like it's a bad look, for a product that is has the attention of like people outside the community, outside of the watch world. They're seeing this and like that's bad.
Right.
Yeah, not great.
Yeah, it's only I'm hoping to get I'm actually thinking about just picking one up on StockX because I want to make content too. I'm irrational and
It's
want it, but
business
maybe that's what
expense,
they want.
It's a yeah,
Yep.
it makes a
It's a
certain amount
business
of sense.
expense.
Yeah. When we wrote our first review of a Moonswatch, we like they were purchased on StockX, and Zach
Oh
actually
wow.
wrote about that in the in his he wrote a little editorial which we'll link to in the show notes on like the AP Swatch rollout, and he mentioned that. So yeah, no shame in going on to StockX or eBay
No.
if you think you can, relatively fair price. But yeah, I shouldn't. Don't wait in line. Don't pay.
Do you
Don't pay.
happen to know, I'm curious, um, if they're rolling them out every day right now, or is it like the Moon Swatch? Because this was before me making content. I actually got in line to buy one for myself because I really wanted one,
Yeah.
and I got in line at 4 a.m. Didn't get it, and but they didn't ship out another batch apparently for like a month or two. Like, do you know if that's happening for the AP strong or no?
So I forget where I heard it. If I can think of it, I'll link to the source. I feel like I heard on a podcast that like there was a report that there was like someone was told to like come back the next day. Someone who got turned away. That's very anecdotal.
Right.
So I don't know. I would be curious to know uh what sort of volume they're receiving these watches in, like day to day, if they're coming day to day. I did hear, I believe it was on the Enthusiast podcast, Stephen Pulver and Justin
Mhm.
Haas podcast. I think that they mentioned that there were like, a crazy number of people, like hundreds of people in line at, I think the Los Angeles Swatch store. And
Yeah.
there were like 50 watches or something. Like, it's like there was like a huge
Wow.
discrepancy between like the number of watches available versus the number of people in line. And one of the problems identified, there and elsewhere is, by people who've been observing this, is that there hasn't been good communication from Swatch about, how many, watches are going to be available when they are available. And that seems like an easy thing to fix, like that's something that like Studio Underdog, who we mentioned earlier on this podcast, figured out with their limited releases for
Mhm.
British Watchmakers Day, and wanted to get, people get in line and then they hand out tickets, and they
Yep.
guarantee people, who've gotten in line a watch, and then they can go about their day and come back and turn in their ticket, for a watch. It seems like a pretty easy thing to
And I
resolve.
think
Yeah, go ahead.
I was saying, I think to your point too, one of the overlooked things with all of this is like Yeah, boohoo, the real collectors can't get them the pay resale, they can't get in line, whatever. I think the the people everybody's forgetting about, and I wrote a little Substack on this, was the actual employees at Swatch. Because I remember during the Moon Swatch, they were so pissed. Like, I
Yeah,
can only imagine what it's like right now working there. They're probably working minimum wage, getting paid nothing. I remember with the Moonswatch, they weren't even making commission on the Moonswatch, so they
right.
were just selling them and not even getting. So I can imagine they're probably not getting it on this because they take it away because it's like I can only imagine what it's like for
Yeah.
them.
Thank you for thinking of the retail employee. I mean, as someone who worked a retail job through college, like you kind of like, you expect your job to be kind of terrible at certain times of the year. Like Thanksgiving, awful. Like the day after
Terrible,
Thanksgiving,
yeah, of
awful. You expect that to be hell, of course.
course.
But then, like Swatch and AP decide to do this collab, like right at the beginning of summer, and it like I'm sure that they have like it, thoughts in their mind of like, what is my summer going to be like? Just dealing with these like hype beasts for months on
Yep.
end. That's terrible. Yeah, I hope they can come up with some sort of like you know, solution to managing the crowds that feels somewhat fair. Just give people tickets. Like I understand like they're not gonna make it available online for a while, I'm sure, because they
Right.
like they want to manufacture some buzz and like the lines are good for that. But at least make it like safe and fun if you can for people, in line. Like lines
Exactly.
can be fun if it's like if they're handled well and there's some like knowledge of like what's actually going to be available. But yeah, they gotta do better. They gotta think of
Yeah.
something else. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask you about real quick, Ben, is this new Seamaster Diver 300 chronograph released in conjunction with a new James Bond video game. Um,
Mhm.
so we got this watch is kind of ridiculous. This watch is like 17 millimeters thick. It's not the first time. This is a platform that's existed for a while in Omega's catalog.
Mhm.
So we shouldn't be surprised by the thickness or anything. But like you posted some content about this earlier. What's your take on the Bond
I just saw so
Seamaster?
many people getting mad at the 44 millimeters. I'm like, first of all, existing platform.
Yeah,
I think where they lost it here is like the 17 millimeters thick, but then also
on a
they
NATO.
put a NATO,
Yes.
so it's gonna wear like I have not worn it, so I'm not going to act like I probably should wear it before I say anything, but like it just makes sense. And then on top of that, when I really think about James Bond, who he is very cool, very understated, very like that watch, the dimensions, the look, everything just do not match with that. It just I'm like it felt like they had a bunch of extra cases and they're like, oh, there's a Bond video game.
Yeah.
It's like it didn't like there was a lot of thought that went behind it. I really do think it's a matter of they had a lot of extra movements and cases of the Seamaster Diver Chrono, and they were like, okay, let's make it a Bond.
Yeah. I think there's probably some truth in that. I gotta admit, I'm pretty skeptical of these watch gaming tie-ins. Like I know that there's
Mhm.
like orders of magnitude more people that are gamers than people who like are going to the movies these days, for example. And I think that's the argument that Hamilton has made with their gaming tie-ins is that like
Mhm.
the gaming audience is huge, and like they obviously do their movie watches, but like it's a shrinking audience, whereas the gaming audience is growing. I just don't know. I don't have insight into like whether it's been successful for Hamilton, and maybe that's why Omega is jumping
Well,
in.
the other thing is
But yeah,
the
go ahead.
watch they released is $9,400. I
Yeah,
don't. I'm a gamer. Like I play video games. If there was a watch a part of a video game, I'd spend $700. Like a
yeah,
Hamilton, I don't know if I'd spend almost $10,000 basically with tax on a watch for a video game. It doesn't. Those two things don't match. I almost understand it more for Hamilton, but
yeah.
like I don't know.
Yeah, I guess like I said, I'm a skeptic about this. I want to, I want to learn more about it. I'm not a gamer, so like I'm coming to
Right.
this from from kind of like a Luddite sort of like perspective, I guess. But yeah, like this watch just seems kind of like the Bond watch. It seems a little ill conceived, and it's like it's not even. I mean, the taste is subjective. I don't find it like very good looking. Like really, it's not
No,
a
it's not.
not a particularly attractive watch, and also yeah, I'm sure you've had this experience of watch brands saying like, "We've got something new coming. It's a big release for us. Here's an NDA." And I think that like I don't know. I think sometimes there's an inverse relationship between like language used by the press person and like getting that NDA and like the actual excitement of the watch. Like sometimes I think like the NDA watches that like you have to like formally sign something, or like, you know, if I'm getting one of those, if I'm signing an NDA, I'm almost like, well, this is going to be bad, right? This is like not actually going to be good. I don't know. There's something I've observed. Like it's not necessarily, you know, you're not necessarily going to get something groundbreaking or like super exciting when you return that NDA back.
No, you're right. I just think a lot of those people, and I do feel bad for them because they're just a messenger. I
Yeah.
just think a lot of it's very corporate versus enthusiasts, and I think
Mm-hmm.
they think, and I also understand that the outside market who are not watch enthusiasts might buy that watch and think it's really cool because of the connection. Like I understand that not everybody's a watch enthusiast, and majority of watch buyers aren't, but I think you do have to think of that from an enthusiast perspective because everybody has their watch guy. You're probably the watch guy of your friends. I'm the watch guy of my friends. And when something does come out, they do ask my opinion.
Yeah.
And I have the watch guy's opinion at the end of the day.
I got to say, I love that. I never feel more useful than when someone who's not a watch person like asks me for my opinion on a watch or my advice about buying a watch. I'm always happy to do that because I feel like I have this like niche, like very specific knowledge area of interest, and you know, I like to feel useful. I like to, you know, I like to be able to like share that with
Exactly.
you know, with someone. So yeah, the James Bond Seamaster Chrono is like few dollars per millimeter of thickness, I think, is how it works out.
I saw. Did I see that on your story?
Yeah, I think you know, trying to provide value to our readers. I do the math. You know, trying to we do the math at Worn and Wound.
Crazy.
Ben, I want to let you go. I know. Thank you so much for making time for coming on the podcast. It's really it's been a pleasure to chat with you about a whole range of things. Come back anytime. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you to everyone for listening. We always appreciate it, of course, and definitely tune in next week for another episode of the podcast. Until then, take care.